Hello. I want to talk about the practicalities of and some of the things you ought to consider if you are in danger of getting into a fight. By this we mean what is essentially an illegal fight. You may not be breaking the law if you're defending yourself. That's a matter for a barrister, a magistrate, or perhaps a judge if you're in a lot of trouble. We're talking about fights outside of a gym that won't be your fault because you're a good person who isn't out looking for trouble. I've had quite a few in years past. I don't go out much now, funnily enough. I did go out last weekend. Don't go out drinking much, that is. And in a fairly large town, I saw something that could have led to trouble. Somebody approached me, there was somebody following him, they were looking at each other, and they had something in mind. I was not far from a group of people. It was obvious I was there for a particular event. Best way to be safe: go to events where you know a lot of people, and don't go anywhere on your own. With rare exceptions, go into the shops during the day when you're safe. I have had cause to defend myself, as did a lot of the people I grew up with. That might make you think, well, you must have been a bunch of troublemakers. We were in the minority. We were into rock music, heavy metal, and at that time you really stood out. And we even used to move around in the town we lived in very carefully. You couldn't walk from one end of the town to the other down the high street without a bit of trouble, so we didn't. You try to go the right way to avoid trouble. Doesn't always work. I've been lucky, never been hurt very much, lots of cuts, lots of bruises. Been stabbed once. I've been bitten here, and despite the fact that I've been stabbed once and I was very lucky, I haven't really been hurt in a fight. And I've not really hurt anyone either, because I've never been there with the intention of doing that. I'm going to go on to that subject a little bit, keeping out of trouble and what you should do, what you should have in mind if you don't manage to keep out of trouble. So here are some things you should have in mind, think about if you might get into a fight, and for the most part I wish I had, because I didn't. Here goes. I'm going to make this as quick as I can, partly because there's not a lot of light left, and also because I do let things drag on and I ramble. Let's try to do something about that today. First of all, you must have some sort of a plan. I don't mean you shouldn't go into a pub or a bar without expecting to get into a fight. If you find yourself regularly going into places where you do expect to get into a fight, then stop going there. I used to go to some pubs, not that were that questionable in themselves, Tottenham Court Road in London, Camden, but you would go past dangerous people, sometimes on the way there and coming back late at night. Very rarely was I on my own, which helps a lot. If you are regularly going to places where you have to plan to defend yourself, then go somewhere else. Still, it's a good idea to have something that resembles a plan. On contact, what are you going to do? When I was younger, I had only studied Shotokan karate, not to a very advanced level. I was only really used to what they called free fighting, standing all together, too low a stance for a really good defence, because you wouldn't be standing in that most of the time. And I only really had jabbing and not much else to rely upon. Have a plan, meaning what are you going to do? If you throw a few punches and that's not working, are you going to get in close? Do you think it's safe to, because you don't think they have a knife? And where will you take the fight to? Where do you plan to go as it progresses? Progression. You have to realise that you're not going to get into a fight and hit somebody a few times, knock them out, all ends happily ever after. You probably will find that it's really, really chaotic. They're trying to hurt you, you're trying to hurt them. The best outcome you have is that one or both of you realise this is silly, this is going to end in nothing good, and it's broken up, or people around you break it up. You might want to have in mind not escalating it. Somebody pushing you a little bit, I think you're probably within the law to hit them, but if somebody pushes you a bit and you start elbowing them in the face and really damaging their nose, you're probably going to find yourself in trouble. So you mustn't necessarily do what you think is most dangerous. No Krav Maga, couple of moves to incapacitate as soon as possible. It's not safe. Maybe it should be, but it's not safe. You'll end up in trouble. Try not to escalate things, try not to make it worse with anyone else in the environment, and think about the ending. What's going to happen? Are they going to be pushed up against the wall and you say stop it, perhaps? Could be far worse outcomes. Are you going to be asking them to stop it? Maybe I should have added a point. If somebody seems competent and is twice your size and might be twice your strength, then even if they are being aggressive, your best option might be just to get out of there. A lot of the time it might be just to get out of there. How's it going to end? You aren't going to knock somebody out and incapacitate them without doing a lot of damage to them, unless it's by sheer coincidence. So you probably are better thinking about restraint, or perhaps being able to persuade them this is a bad idea. That's always a good thing to do. Don't forget that talking can make things better. I might talk about it another time. I've experienced that. I've broken up fights. I've been in a potentially aggressive, violent situation, and I have managed to diffuse it. And it can be done. Sometimes you've got to say the right thing. Sometimes people want an opportunity to diffuse it. So here we have, you should have some sort of a plan. Think about contact, what happens first. Think about progression. Think about potential for escalation, avoiding it, and think about where it's going to end. Now let's quickly have a look at the environment you might be in if you're in a fight. Safety. If you're in a road, get out of the road. If there's any railings and there's a drop nearby, get away from it, even if, again, you have to show a bit of humility. And even if they call it cowardice is much better than falling from a high place. It can happen. You get all these bridges around train stations, you get bridges sometimes crossing the streets, you get subways. These things can happen. I mean the British subway, stairways that you walk down to go under a road, not the American subway in this case. Safety. Is it very icy? Are there other things around that could be very dangerous? You could win a fight by hurting somebody and incapacitating them, and we've probably, if we're into combat sports, all seen videos online. Somebody, one punch, hits somebody, they fall over, crack their head on the pavement, and the life of both people is ruined. You could have been defending yourself, and this is the problem with combat. It's why you should avoid getting into fights, because you could win the fight and you could punch somebody, you could be defending yourself, you could have been in the right, but you could ruin your life very quickly and permanently. Escape. You might have to escape. Look around for where you might escape to. You will have already probably been doing that, thinking about safety. You can be in a situation where you have no choice but to escape. I've had to do that. Don't want to go into details very much. There was once some trouble that happened. I was there. I didn't cause it. Somebody was there, armed to a degree, not with a knife or anything like that, but they were looking for trouble. I probably should have got out of there. I was young, about 21 perhaps, and I should have known better, should have got out of there. I wasn't in the middle of it until I noticed that everybody else had fled. Don't blame them. It wasn't a good place to be. They hadn't abandoned me. They were 100 metres down the road in a car calling for me to come. I noticed I was surrounded by people. I had to get out of there. I am not the sort of person who's going to tell you a story. I was fighting 5 people. I was taking hits. I was telegraphing like this and trying to keep them back, and it worked to some degree. One funny thing happened. Somebody was in front of me, legs on his knees, hopping up and down. I thought, what the hell is going on? Then I learned, got a punch there, he was distracting me. These sort of things happen. I got out of there with just a few cuts. I was pretty lucky. I ran to the car. It was a long time ago, but it was a pretty stupid thing for people to instigate. There was more than one side to the story. I should have just not been there, and that would have been the wiser thing to do. Maybe I could have talked some of the other people out to it. That would have been even better. Got to think about the consequences, and talked about that with safety. If you hit somebody in a dangerous place and they're hit by a car, their head hits the pavements, you ruined your life. It's not worth it. It's never worth it. Maybe you should have run away, maybe you should have escaped, maybe you should have stopped it to begin with, if you can. So that's environment. Think about safety. think about your escape, and think about the consequences. Again, I don't mean you should go to a place where you're out socially and focus on what am I going to do if there's trouble. If you're in a strange place, if you're walking through busy London streets late at night, then you should have these sort of things on your mind, and you shouldn't be doing it on your own to begin with. If you have to, if you find yourself in a horrible situation and that happens, then think very carefully about where you are. Maybe an option is getting back in your car, maybe it's staying somewhere else until it's light, maybe there's an option to have somebody else come along. Now let's have a look at people. People will always be involved. You've got onlookers. You want to avoid further conflict by upsetting other people, making them get involved. This is a particular case if you're in a bar. Might be somebody around thinking, well, I'm tougher than that, and you might have had a bit of a fight with somebody. You've won, it's over, and you look up and somebody else wants to have their turn. One of the things I was taught quite early on when I started training in Muay Thai, 2007, and it was the instructor who was focusing on Muay Thai in this club, but he was also trained quite well in jiu-jitsu, and he had worked as a doorman quite a bit. And he said that you keep looking down, you have to be aware in the periphery of what's going on around you, but don't look at people, because it doesn't take much for somebody, especially when adrenaline is high, to think, I want to have a fight now. Quick point talking about doormen. A lot of the time they might be around, they might be involved, they might save you if there's violence when you're out somewhere in public. But it's wrong, really wrong, to assume that doormen are always in the right and that they're necessarily good people. I have been aware of 2 cases where quite the opposite was true. A cousin of mine was once hurt very badly, pushed downstairs by a doorman in a coastal town. He went to hospital, it went to court, the doorman was quite in the wrong, there was no dispute about that. This was some 20 years ago. They're not necessarily righteous, they're not necessarily doing the right thing. Some of them might be thugs and bullies. That definitely happens in that trade. I've also known doormen who are good people, some who have been friends of mine to some extent. Another friend, more locally, had his head smashed into a large TV screen by the doorman, and that went to court. He died later because of that, and that went to court. The doorman was in the wrong. So if there were people out there naive enough to think, oh well, if you're in trouble with a doorman, then you're doing something wrong, it might not be the case. Probably will, but it might not be the case. We have onlookers. Avoid further conflict with onlookers. Be aware of the potential for interference. If you were walking down a street after you've been to the shops and somebody comes walking towards you and they've just left a gang of people at the corner, something's probably going on. Perhaps you might just get into trouble with 1 or 2 people and other of their friends are arriving. Perhaps there might be people who aren't friends, but they simply for some reason or another see you as the enemy. Quite possible when it comes to football crowds, things like that. Got to be aware of that, and again, keep that in the equation if there does come a point when you think, I've just got to get out of here, I can't defend myself. One thing I do want to mention here is a lot of this goes out the window if you've got vulnerable people with you, if your family's with you. It all changes a lot, and then you do have to take steps that you wouldn't usually take, where you do have to compromise your own safety because something is that critical. That's beyond the scope of this video, and the only thing you can do about that is think very well in advance. But things still do happen sometimes, and it might not be your fault. Beyond the scope of this video, of course it's horrific. Happens more often than it used to. Last of all, on people, let's just think about video. It may be on CCTV, very likely if you're in a busy town. The amount of busy towns that don't have CCTV now, probably very low. But whether there's CCTV or not, you'll probably be on video. And if you're in the right, that will serve in your favour, but you might want to keep that in mind. Here's one thing you might want to do. If you can begin a fight with somebody by defending yourself without punching them, that's probably a really good idea. I've done this a couple of times in the past, grabbed people's wrists, and in one case it worked fairly well, it still went wrong anyway. In the second case, I wasn't strong enough to really restrain them well. It's not a very good way to do it, of course, like that. I just wanted to grab their fist, stop them hitting me. I wasn't causing the fight. It was clear they were going to hit me. But just think, with video evidence, if somebody can see this man was throwing punches, this man held his fist and tried to stop him from throwing punches, that's in my favour. Something really worth considering. And I say from experience, this is something you can really easily practice in the gym. It might not be as hard as you think. You think about the fist really flying around, well, especially if it's some idiot in a bar, they might not be that fast. Practice it with your friends in the gym. See how easily you can grab their fists, and don't have it staged so I'm going to throw the fastest combination I can. That won't work very well. But just try it. Have it in your arsenal of possible things to do if a fight starts. Now let's have a look at the aftermath. What do? Do you get out fast? Might be the best idea, especially if there was a small scuffle, nobody's really hurt, somebody's ego is bruised, they found out that you know how to fight, you hit them, they were shocked, they're hurt, they're now sitting there moaning, and they probably want revenge. I'm not suggesting you get out of there fast to avoid the police. I'm suggesting you get out of there fast because it might be to nobody's advantage to take things any further, and you might be better off, you can say later, I got out of there for my safety, thought he might have friends, he looked very angry and aggressive, so I went. It's not the same as doing something that's really a severe crime, hitting somebody with a car and then going. If, though, on the other hand, somebody has been hurt, perhaps yourself, people are bleeding, there's been an accident, somebody hit their head on the ground, you're probably best to wait for the police, probably will count in your favour. And here's the big thing that's a theme running through this. Fights out on the street, legal fights essentially, they never end well. If nothing else happens, even if you're not badly injured, if you don't injure somebody else, it's ruined your night. I've used that diffusing fights a couple of times. Once a few years ago in Luton, once in London, once in a local town. You can just try to reason with people. Now if they're furious, if adrenaline's really going, it's not going to do much. But sometimes people want an excuse. They want a way out to say, especially when egos are involved. This is the thing. If it's based on outright thuggery, things are a bit different. But if egos are involved, you showing a way out. You can get out of this without looking stupid. Just listen. We're here to see the band. We're here to have a drink. This isn't a good night. Whatever happens, it's going to end badly. A hospital, a prison cell. It's the worst thing. It's the worst thing that can happen, relatively, when you're having a night out. And that takes me on to diffusion after waiting for the police. Now, apart from trying to diffuse it when trouble starts, you might think that you can diffuse the aftermath, what's going to happen later. If you hit somebody and it was quite effective and they fell onto the floor, it might do you well if there's a crowd of people, especially if there's video, for you to say, I thought he was going to kill me. I felt in danger. I don't know enough about the law to tell you what's definitely going to be effective in a court of law. But let's just put it this way. If somebody attacks you, you hit them and you knock them out and you start going, yes, yes, look at that. You're more likely to be found part of the trouble than if you start saying, I had to do that. I thought he was going to kill me. I thought he might have had a knife. Things like that. It's just worth keeping in mind. And that's it. Here are the points in summary. And I think if you have these in mind before you're in risk of getting in a fight, it will help you out. Certainly won't hurt you. 19 minutes. I made this video the other day and it was 20 minutes long. It was raining and I rambled on. I think I had a lot of good points in there, but I sometimes make it too boring. This has been made more concise. I think I said everything I want to say, and I'm going to try. It's the first time I've taken a video down after putting it up. This isn't right. I didn't mind the way I presented it, the way I filmed it, the audio was okay, but I just said too much that didn't need to be said. That's part of what I have to learn to be far, far better at. Got some more lifting videos coming soon. Things are going pretty well. A car just drove past with a megaphone saying World War III is coming. I've never ever had that happen before anywhere. I don't know what that's about. It's not coming, not right now anyway, not today. Things are going well with my left hand side back injury that seemed to be the result of deadlifting. I can't feel it. I deadlifted 2 days ago just up to 90 kilos. Even then I thought do a few at 120. I didn't, and it didn't hurt the next day, but I think if I had even pushed a bit harder it would have. As I mentioned briefly, I went out last weekend and I had some friends visiting on a Sunday, so I had a busy weekend, threw my schedule out, so I did a whole body session earlier in the week. I'm going to do one tomorrow, going to get back to a more solid schedule next week. Still no regular deadlifting for a little while. Got sword videos coming. Problem I've got is it gets dark very early now, and I tend to make videos in the afternoon, and there's not a lot of daylight for doing that in. I'll stop now because I'll make it just as long as the last video. I think I might have said 22 minutes. It was 42 minutes long. I split it into two, uploaded one half. No good. Thanks for watching. I will keep making videos for the moment, and I have got a lot of ideas, even though I don't get around to things very quickly. See you next time. Please consider subscribing. I promise they will get better, and there's more coming soon. My name's Mark. Cheers.